All right, welcome back to AI Coffee Hour. I am Josh Patterson here with my good pal Roger Magoulis. Roger, where are you currently employed?
I'm at Owlet, the
Out.
baby sock that monitors for SIDS.
Yeah. Roger's out there saving the babies. I love it. I love it. All right, Roger, what do we got going on this week? We're going to kind of jump into it.
Yeah, what I think is kind of interesting, just because it's been crossing my mind a lot, is the whole frontier versus non-frontier models. And I think that there's things going on around that follow past trends with software and development issues and stuff. And I found myself being of kind of two minds about it. As I'm kind of curious what other people think, but I'll just explain my position on this. Is I think, and I happen to use Claude Code the most.
Mm-hmm.
I switch between that and Gemini, but in Gemini I don't use it I just use the Gemini as a chat bot to help with code. But mostly I'm using Claude Code, and I'm finding that as someone who's been CLIing for a long time, that the CLI approach is really good, and that I've got enough experience that I feel like my interactions with Claude, where I check every step and so forth, is pretty appropriate, and that it's doing a good job. I also, just as one kind of digression, in my world, and people I know, Opus 4.5 made a big difference in how reliable the code that was generated by the model was. And that is kind of a vote for, wow, foundation models can make a difference. And certainly I'm finding it pretty reliable.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that regard, that it's good. On the other hand, I worked at O'Reilly a long time. I'm in a lot of open source circles. And a lot of people I know are taking their old Mac Minis. I have a Mac Mini back here that I'm going to take. The latest thing is to put Gemma 27B on, because it's a pretty good model, and build their own thing, and then start using that when it's appropriate. And I can tell you the first thing I'm going to do with that, because I am going to try to do that this weekend, is I really don't want to pay Google to monitor my email for summarizing. I don't think I need a foundation model to do that. I'm going to try to set up this old Mac Mini to do that kind of work. Will I test it with code? I probably will. Let me just say one other thing. As I know I've been talking a lot. I want to really hear what you think about all this. But when I'm using Claude, I have 3 CLI windows open, plus I've got VS Code with Claude in there. And what I'm doing is I've got Haiku, Sonnet, and Opus. And I decide to try to manage my costs, which one I'm going to use. And I think I'm probably okay at that, figuring out when it's worth spending the extra money for Opus. And most of the time I'm in Sonnet, just because I do it. And in fact, one of the things I do is I ask Gemini for this kind of problem, which one should I use? And it actually gives pretty good answers to that, which I think is kind of funny to do that. So I'm already, in my mind, splitting things up into, yes, different tools for different purposes. And I realize I'm losing some context, but the haiku questions, they're non-contextual, they're formatting, I kind of know pretty much what I want to do. I just want to get some reinforcement. Having said all that, I think for the majority of people, when you look at software that's really gotten traction and taken off, it's usually a path of least resistance in a particular domain. And as long as it isn't out of the developer's pocket, I think there's going to be some kind of momentum around the foundation models to do that. So that's why I'm of two minds.
Yeah.
There's going to be that whole open source community. There's going to be people who are money constrained. I assume the foundation model is going to raise their prices. Someone's got to pay for all that CapEx. Is that there's going to be plenty of people, just like there was plenty of people doing open source, that are going to be spinning up these models. And there's also going to be plenty of people who are going to be satisfied with using the foundation models. and that the spend is, when they look at the grand scheme of things, is worth it. So there, I've said my piece on a big topic
Yeah.
where I don't have a conclusion, but I think both will live.
I don't think anybody has real conclusions right now, and we're living through it. And it's always hard to see how things are shifting in the moment. It's easy to look back at like 2010 to 2020 and go, oh, these were the themes. But in that moment, it's just like, is Claude going to keep going, or and it did, and it really took off. But first half of 2010 to 2015, it was really hard to tell what was going to happen. Something I picked up on, you said that Claude does a really good job, and I agree. I have 4 or 5. I have a go-to-market Claude project. I have. I don't let it write for me, but I treat it as a GRA, and I have it does draft support, and so it'll write look, I'm really into the epistemic responsibility of reading right now. That's one of the things I had to do some research on, and it has to always produce 3 peer-reviewed references and download a copy so that I can validate that it was real, right? So things like that, there's a lot of support functions it does, and you're right, it does a really good job of getting the task or getting close. But I think that is something that's very interesting, because as an engineer, if it gets the task, you're like, good job. If it gets close, you go, oh, well, I can just sort of nudge it to finish up the job. And that type of work and knowledge work, I think that you and I as engineers put up with. But I think the moment you go to the other side of the house in any business you're in or supporting, and near the COO, the moment it doesn't sum something up exactly, he goes or she goes, no, and goes back to Excel, right? So there's a big difference between our tolerance for close and good enough and their tolerance, And I think that sometimes, a lot of times, people are making the mental assumption that all of this automation is just going to jump over there and work fine. And I think that there are some disconnects there that people aren't looking for.
Let me say, I completely agree with your point. I was really taking my kind of engineer's hat on when I was saying that. And then I think I brought up a couple times that for some of the experience, they're probably pretty good at prompting at the Goldilocks level. Yeah. Not too broad, not too detailed, but and not too systemic. You're trying to solve this particular thing, and so you're going into it. And I do think there's a trust thing. I also think for people who are trying to speculate on what's going to happen, they extrapolate their personal experience, in a way I just did, and go into other realms. And I don't think that holds. I think that every cohort that is thinking about whether to use this or not has a whole different perspective on things and a different set of experiences and circumstances that are going to affect on how much they trust it. Can they get in that Goldilocks zone easily? And do they spend time on stuff that is wasting their time enough that there's a problem? I know when I first started using Claude Code, the mistakes it was making was around versions. Well, I started saying, I'm using this version. But as I thought about it, it made perfect sense. I happened to be using, it was Airflow. I was using the most recent version. Claude is trained. It was trained in the past. There was a lot more of the old version of Airflow code out there than the new one.
Yeah.
So this made sense. Statistically, that old version stuff was going to be there. So I had to say, remember, I'm on Airflow 3.x.
Yeah.
Right? Keep that in mind. Well, imagine that you're in a world where that kind of versioning and stuff isn't what you're close to. Do you version your spreadsheets?
Or what is net profit this quarter? That's good. One bank's version of that may be very different than another bank's version of that for all sorts of internal tribal knowledge caveats. And I think that their version of the Goldilocks zone has a different modality to it, if that's the right way to say it. And I think that their tolerance for error and their comfort level for the tooling, like the CLI, I think you and I are like, oh yeah, I love the CLI, I love Bash or what have you. And then there's no, because there is a, when you first try Claude Code, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's sort of like you got to kind of get a feel because it's a little different than you're used to, and then it really explodes in usefulness. A little bit of steep, for us, a little bit of a steep learning curve, but there's a good run out of it, But there's a whole other world out there that they're not, they're not going to touch something like that, and so I think it's going to look very different. I think automation for knowledge work on the line of business is probably going to look a lot different.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was talking to some people working on some spreadsheet stuff, and I, as an analyst, I'm really an analytic engineer.
Yeah.
I use spreadsheets all the time. Like I don't always write pivot SQL. I put it into a pivot table if it's there to do that, or use a pivoting front end. And my assumption was, a lot of companies run a lot of their finance using Excel macros. They download whatever from their GL, and their final processes include like reviews and stuff that are in a spreadsheet. And I think that I extrapolated from my own experience that, well, gee, that stuff seems like it should be pretty easy to automate. But macros are not what those things train on. That is not how a foundation model trains on. And what I've heard is that it is not that straightforward to move to code, where I thought it would be really easy to do it. So there's a case where, I made an incorrect assumption, but I can understand why it was incorrect because of training. I also was talking to someone who works on firmware. I said, firmware, there isn't that much training. You don't get as much bang for the coding.
I'll throw out something that I've found is like precision prompting. Crafting a prompt, I think, saves you a lot of money because what you do is I don't use a lot. Like these people saying that they use like 100 billion tokens a month or whatever. I don't even understand that because like all of my prompts, and no, we don't turn out as much code as maybe a big shop does, but like they're always like a couple pages long, and it's like, this is what we're trying to do. This is the background for all these topics. This is how they relate. And then like, it does some caching tricks so that it's not burning tons of tokens, but you can be ultra precision, specific. And like we've done some web development this week and we use a specific template in a specific way, but like we gave it the docs and said, think about things visually this way. And it's probably better than our internal engineers at using that template, honestly, in terms of the stuff it's come up with. So I think that if you either build an official skill or you give it the correct context on how to think about that area, and I know that's probably not going to work for every area, but you can get a lot of bang for your buck, for not a lot of money, from what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think the whole token thing, I think that understanding how it's using the tokens and stuff, and we had someone who didn't realize that they were using quite a few more tokens than they thought because of some of the context they were providing. And, like everyone will learn, but just like, we've already got the precedence of people on Snowflake and Databricks and BigQuery and stuff. You kind of learn what to do and what not to do to like not overdo it.
Right.
And you're going to get burned every now and then. But
this reminds me of the MapReduce era, and I really at Cloudera I did a lot of MapReduce. That was my jam. It just made sense to me. A lot of people hated it even at Cloudera, but like if they had a hard MapReduce problems, they'd send me out to do it, and I enjoyed that with customers. But I was really good at like doing all these tricks to optimize it. But what happened is a lot of companies were like, we just want a SQL compiler, we want Hive, right? And I was like, this is like 3 times worse in terms of eating resources on a job. They're like, we don't care, we just want SQL, right? How I think this will come back to like Claude Code and tokens is, I think over time, like you and I are going to like optimize token tricks, but as token costs continue to fall through competitive pressure over the next decade or 5 years, the tooling will more and more make it go away. in such that it'll just be software. I think, and I think that that's a great seg to another kind of topic we've been talking about is, the harness is the IP around the models. My hypothesis is after this wave dies down, it's all just software again, and I've been doing some writing lately. And one of the things I've kind of come up with is because people keep saying agency and agents have agency and agents can do this and that, but capability without responsibility is still a tool, right? Capability without responsibility is still a tool. Software is a tool. Even if you take software plus machine learning models, it's still a tool. It doesn't have kind of legal and moral standing within society. So the agency article, part of this breaks down, but also people finding that the software harness is the IP, So I'm just gonna say I think this all becomes just software again, and that's not the popular thing to say, and I don't put that on the front page of our corporate website. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I think you're basically right. And again, I'm extrapolating from my own experience. It's a tool, and I'll just give like one specific example. I am not Mr. GitHub. I have to be reminded of
to push software.
Yeah, and part of it was that I used to use a Mercurial. I don't remember Mercurial, which was a simpler version control system.
Well, there were several of them. I mean, what was it?
Yeah. SCCS.
Yeah, there were several, and I was never good at any of them. I'm functionally good at GitHub, and if I have to do something complex, I'm looking it up or asking,
Yeah, that's it. If it's anything, I mean, I had some. It doesn't even matter what the thing was, but I've started saying, you know what? I'm not that good at GitHub. That is something I can offload.
Yeah.
And the models, I think even if I was running a model on my Mac, would be perfectly good at doing that. And I think one of the things that will happen in support of what you were saying is that this is part of the tooling, is that it will control something. Just like kind of like Jinja templating, is a way to have an abstraction layer built in. Not that I can't stand. I find Jinja noisy and stuff, but a lot of software has that in there and helps you make decisions. Just like me kind of, outsourcing my Git commands is I'm happy to do that because am I doing better analytics? If I'm better at GitHub? No. Is the model perfectly capable of handling that stuff? Yes. So I think that what will happen over time is that we will focus on different parts of what it means to develop, whether you're a regular developer or an analytic developer, that it's just going to change how you manage your work. And that some things that used to waste a lot of time, and I'm old enough that I was building a data warehouse on an Oracle system, and I went to talk to the DBA. Remember when there were DBAs? And I said, I'm going to be needing a lot more space here. And he said, oh, you want me to raise that from 10 megabytes to 20 megabytes? And I'm like, no, this is analytics. I want gigabytes there.
Yeah.
And now, if you think about what Snowflake and BigQuery and Databricks do, they've taken, you don't think about a DBA, you don't even think about, all you think about is how much you're spending. Everything else is handled. And so something has been offloaded to someone else.
Well,
right?
Yeah, I think you used a term with me one time, cognitive labor arbitrage, right? And I think productivity always wins. We'll get rid of software. We won't get rid of productivity, right? We'll hold on to productivity as tight as we can. And, I write about this all the time. We're always in a productivity game. It's a productivity treadmill. You have to run as fast as you can to stay in the same place, and even faster get ahead. It's Red Queen's game. But you are just saying basically, my time's expensive. If I can offload these things, right, I can move faster, right? And then and that probably only keeps pace. I think that everyone is like, oh, I'll have free time. Well, no, you're just going to keep pace with the times. I mean, banks used to be, open only 4 days a week because they had to reconcile on Friday, and then computers could do it. They didn't take a day off. They just opened 5 days, So yeah, the push for productivity never ends. But
Does that,
yeah,
and Juven's paradox comes into this too.
yeah,
Is that you'll do um, different things, and yeah, I don't. I mean, the only way I think um, we get more time is that there really is something like I don't even know what to call it because I don't want to call it AGI, but something that makes more white collar jobs go away, and that there's the universal income and Keynes 15-hour weeks becomes part of it. But I can also see something else happening, and this is like getting into broad demographics and stuff like that, is that I could see a push for things like 32-hour weeks. Um, and in certain fields
yeah,
as something that is kind of good for the economy,
yeah,
good for job creation. People used to make fun of France for doing that because I think they have like a 35-hour week. There's some kind of shorter week
yeah,
than was typical in the rest of Western Europe and U.S. And but I could see that eventually happening in some fields. You know, it was a while ago I saw the movie. I don't remember the details, but there's a movie called Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House with Cary Grant. And he's an advertising executive. And building this house is turning into and both you and I have done work on house renovations. It always takes longer than you think.
yeah,
And he's getting like increasingly exasperated by how much time he has to spend doing this house. He has the whole summer to come up with one slogan, right? Business was just slower when productivity was at a different pace because there was not the technology and knowledge processing infrastructure that we have now. And no one, now you can get 37 things in a minute as possible slogans. 37, you can get 3,000. That would take you longer to go through than it took to come up with.
yeah.
And so I think that you're right. It's a bit of Red Queen stuff, and there's always more to do. And as humans, we tend to put guardrails around how much can get done. I mean, you can push yourself so much, but at some point, we're humans, and
Yeah, well, the brain's a muscle. I mean, people don't they don't want to think about it that way. But I know at the point in the day, two things that I know in my day. I know if the quality of my sleep is not good, and I track it with my Apple Watch and an app. If I don't get a certain number, hours, my heart rate's not a certain place, my cognitive ability for the rest of the day is gonna be shot. And I'll wake up sometimes and look at that thing and go, I'm done. I'm gonna be terrible today. I'm not gonna do anything that needs deep critical thought. And I think the other thing too is it's like running a marathon or running a race. You only have so much time in that cardio side of your body where you're gonna be able to really get great output. And I think the brain has the same thing. There's a point in the day where you're going to tail. The younger kids, it's going to be longer, but they can run. They can run longer. They can think longer, right? But I notice the quality of my thinking, my cognitive labor, after 5-6 p.m. At this point, it's functional. I have ideas. I write them down, but a lot of times I try to shift into other things because I just know the quality of the thought is not as good as it could be.
Yeah, I think we're all needing to adjust to it. In that it's easy to get swept up. It's a bit of a dopamine push or release when you're using something in Claude Code and you're going through something and you feel like you're working with a pretty good intern and you're getting feedback. It's like extreme programming.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I'll have an idea. I mean, my kind of current thing is my Apple Pen here. I always have my iPad with me, and great ideas come to me. I feel like when I'm either on a long walk or I'm at the gym. And if I'm on a long walk, I just record it. I do voice to text notes just so I can just file it away. And if I'm in the gym, I'll have my little notebook with me and I'll just write it down while I'm in the gym, right? Just kind of like, here's a thought. Here's something to write about. Here's something a way to look at something. But then you can kind of take that back to like you're saying, and then I'll sit down and get with Claude Code and then kind of work it out like we're doing right now, right? Like last night, this week, I got some great feedback about our business, and it was it was insightful, but it was like one of those, you need to focus more, you know. And I got some feedback about how I should focus. So I really sat down and looked at that critically, and then kind of did some self-evaluation, but like worked with Claude Code. I mean, it was like, be critical here. What parts of this work for us and what parts don't, but that's a neat way to have a bit of introspection as well, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a discussion with another developer about reflection,
Mm-hmm.
and that I think when you're in a Claude Code rush, I know you're using Claude Code. I mean, whether it's a Codex rush or whatever you're using,
Yeah.
um, you tend to have reflection crowded out, and I think reflection is really important. And you called it introspection, and I completely agree. I bicycle a lot, and I swear that is the best productivity tool ever for me.
Yeah.
I've got a problem. I hop on the bike, and I'm like, I start thinking of things, and certainly sleep. Like you're stuck on a problem, and you say, okay, I'm done. Somehow your brain figures it out, and the next morning you're like, oh, exactly.
I'll tell you, one of the hardest things to do is you're late at night, your brain's tired, and you'll get cranky. Like you'll be thinking about something, and then you'll get stressed out about it, and you're trying to press on it, but you're too tired to really give it quality, like mental labor, and to make yourself go to bed. And last night I was stuck on this. I was just like, I was worried about something in marketing and focused on marketing and social media, and I was getting frustrated. And finally I was like, just close the laptop, just go to bed, and that's harder than it should be sometimes,
Yeah, back this is going back quite a few years, when it was Unix System 5, before we had Linux, they had a pattern of, I forget if it was the odd or even numbers, but the odd number releases were feature adds,
mm-hmm.
and the even number releases were bug fixes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a built-in reflection cycle. And I'm wondering if like there's kind of a rush now. I think people vibe coding. It's like, wow, this is like wild. I got I got a React thing built. I don't know React. I don't know JavaScript. Yeah. I've got these screens up and stuff. Isn't that like kind of cool? I kind of want that rush hit again.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's real.
Yeah, but having the bug fix part and feeling like that's just as productive, that the reflection part is really important. And it brings up another point. I'm curious what you think about this. When I started to get my computer science degree, I took assembler. It was my first class. Yeah. I never programmed an assembler after that, but I'm glad I learned it.
Yep.
And I'm glad I know, I've gone through from assembler to C. Actually, did Pascal for a while, C, Perl, Python, of course, SQL the whole time through. And I'm glad I know that. And I feel like understanding a little bit of how things work gives me some insight. And I'm wondering, with particularly younger folks who might be picking things up, I'm curious your opinion on how much fundamentals should you know to do a better job at the more abstracted stuff that you can get working with a model?
That's a great question. And this past 2 weeks, I've done a lot of background kind of GRA style research on like, what is the responsibility of work? There's things like what's called expert reading. What does reading, what's the commingling of reading and thought? This also touched on, I was at a conference this week, and a kid who's graduating, he'd come up to me and he's like, should I just throw all this away? All the jobs are going away. And I was like, dude, no, get your degree. I think it's super important to know these, like the idea that these machines are just going to all do all the thinking for us and all the work, I think is wrong. And it's the same thing as whenever the power limb shows up and the textile weavers are like, oh, we're never going to have jobs anymore. Well, that was physical labor. Now we're talking about cognitive labor. And you still have to understand what's happening. Even if it does the work for you, it can't own the work. And I think that people are missing that piece. Ownership of work is a real thing because the machine, can't take responsibility legally for output. And if you're a highly regulated industry, that responsibility doesn't poof go away. And maybe you can shift it to a company somehow, but you know, um, I told the kid, no, you need to get your degree. You need to understand these things. I love that I know assembler and I haven't used it. And now I'm not doing as much Python anymore, but I need to understand it. So when we develop tools, I can go back and look at it and go, yeah, Claude Code got this right. Or I can write prompts that are ultra precision to make changes that are tight and efficient and smart. Um, Now, what you're touching on really gets down to the nitty gritty of capability without responsibility is just a tool. We have to people still own the agency. There's a ceiling on automation where the judgment and strategy of people is today and not anytime soon going to be irreplaceable in the production of work products. And so to have that judgment and have that strategy, people have to have the background. And the only way that you can have that background is if you go and you study and you read. Reading changes you. And I think, forever people would say, well, reading is fundamental. Well, it really, really is. It really, on a mechanical level and changing the weights of the brain, is. And I think that we'll come around to that in that knowing these things is still critical. Getting degrees is still critical. People being involved is still critical, and it's not going away. We're going to go faster, but everyone's going to go faster. And if you don't go faster, you fall off the Red Green's treadmill, right? But yeah, it's still, somebody still needs to know assembler. Somebody
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah, and I also think, I mean, just generally, I really like the book Range by David Epstein. Um, that generalists, people who are widely read
Mm-hmm.
and track a lot of things, just bring more context. Just like to give context to an LLM, you're giving context to the person. And in a world where LLMs are trained on old stuff, right, to move into something new usually means ripping off of something that exists in a way
Yeah.
that LLM probably isn't going to do.
Yeah.
Um, and and I think that being able to integrate different parts, like you're a businessman, you're a coder, you've got a lot of hats to wear. The more you understand about what ends up sounding like behavioral economics, it's really important. And political economic, the political economy we work in, there's a lot to know. And we talked about the kind of goldilocks modality, which maybe that's the new meme. um, what does that really require? Critical thinking. And
Yeah.
critical thinking is what the degree gets.
Yeah. I have this theory, and it's an article coming out on the 3 layers of knowledge work, and that execution layer of kind of pulling stuff together and processing data, stuff like that. I think you can automate that. But that critical thinking part, which I call the judgment strategy layers, 2 layers above it, and this is based in classical peer-reviewed research, like Polanyi and classical economics and classical computer science. Um, those don't go away, and that's where the agency lives, and that's also where the critical thought lives. In the other computationally hard part is reasoning can be subjective based off your own experience and your own biases and your own judgment, and machines are having a hard time inhabiting that part of the reasoning space. I do believe that they synthetically reason in the same way that they're just a neural network, right? And if they can reason over text, okay, I believe that they do reason because I believe that convolutional neural networks do object detection. But so then by extension, they can do some sort of synthetic reasoning, but they can't currently do the reasoning that replaces people. And I think that that's where the all jobs go away breaks down very fast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I don't see it. It might be I'm taking an older person's perspective on it, but I was told in the late '80s, what are you going to do when that first AI summer of small talk and stuff. When we don't need programmers anymore.
Yeah.
But you talk about Jevon's paradox.
Yeah. Yeah. As productivity goes up, demand increases. We're increasing, like Audet, he has a paper. I may have said that there's economist. He has a paper talks about why are there more jobs? Basically, it's just like, well, shouldn't these jobs all be gone? And no, it's demand keeps increasing, and that's kind of playing back to what you saw back in the small town era. I think we keep every AI winner. I think we go through this too. I think there's been like 4 of these, and I've written about the 4 that I know of, and it's one you're talking about. One of them, deep learning. It wasn't an AI winner, but I was told that, like, these could be AGI, and I'm like, no, there's just neural network. No.
And you were writing about it.
Yeah. It was like a decade ago. I mean, I wrote, was writing about it again, and I was in a conference this week, and the AGI topic came up, and I get so flustered about it because I think I've been, we've both been dealing with the question for a long time, but you're like, guys, it's just linear algebra. Come on. I get that I think what we really need to look at hard is, like, what does it mean to be a person? It's not so much are those alive. It's just like, well, no, what's personhood? And let's dig into that, right? Because those are not going to be alive legally or morally anytime soon. But we need to do more. We don't understand what makes us right now. In a final way.
But I think we both brought up an analogous example. When we're stuck on something, we exercise.
Yeah.
We're embodied.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And somehow that makes a difference to our own neural networks. In a way that is hard to explain, but is demonstratably happens all the time.
And I'm about to take a walk right after this podcast episode. But in my brain, what I think it is, or what in my kind of layman's guess is, I think it's some sort of garbage collection. Whenever you have pauses on the JVM, it does garbage collection. I think the brain does that, and when it cleans things up, you go, oh, well, it's just these 2 things. Let's put these 2 things together. Because all the junk is gone, and it puts them together, and you go, oh, it was just that. It was just that.
It's such a great feeling, too, when that happens.
Roger, this has been an awesome call. I know you're coming back. We're going to keep doing this. You're going to be a recurring guest. I actually have more stuff I got to do today. Let's stop right here. Call it for the day.
I'm going to bring up one quick thing.
Go ahead.
We brought up CLI, command line.
Yeah.
Unix,
yes.
70s.
Yes.
Spreadsheets.
Yes.
70s.
Yes.
And by everything SQL underneath it.
Yeah.
70s.
Yeah.
We're going on, a long time of 3 fundamental technologies that still shape how we do our work today.
Yeah. Well, legacy momentum. That's all. That's all I can guess. No, they were really good. The people who were doing computer science in the 70s, they were hardcore, and they knew what they were doing, and they had great theory, and they brought it, and it's delivered for a long time.
Yeah, great talking to you, Josh.
Thank you so much, Robert. Roger. I can't podcast and drive. This was awesome. This was a good episode. This was really good. I want to we need to do this a bunch.